Hello and welcome to the Hypertrophy Odyssey chapter 255. It is the fourth day of the week. My bad. It is the fourth day of the week, aka the Buster Cannon workout. I am on my way to the gym right now. I am feeling pretty good. I am very excited. As you can see here, there's still light outside, which is nice. Always nice when that happens. But anyways, to the main subject matter for today. So today's subject matter was brought up because of the audiobook that I'm currently listening to, and it was a discussion about the Bible, and I was like, okay. And I realized, oh, this was something I did want to talk about whenever I made the first part of this, sacrifice. So this is sacrifice part 2. The quality of the sacrifice. Now, I might have mentioned or talked about this in that video, but I really wanted to go a little bit more in depth with that subject because it is something that is slightly, how do I say this, not necessarily talked about when it comes to things, and people misinterpret and or miscommunicate what is a worthy sacrifice or not. I think everybody knows the one thing that we all sacrifice, no matter what we do, no matter where we go, and no matter who we are, where we're at, or what part of the universe we are in. The one thing that remains a constant is the same thing no matter what: time. And we'll talk more about that particular sacrifice and how maybe it's not as much as you'd think, but we'll discuss that later. But for now, I'll say this. It is a very heavy and deep subject matter, so it's not like I will take this lightly. There will probably be more episodes of this as time progresses, but I cannot guarantee. This was something that I really was like, oh yeah, this makes total sense to talk about, and I was like, why not? It's something fun, or interesting at least to me. A little bit of a break from the last few days, so there is that. But with that being said, I will get into more detail when we go inside.
Alright, so I started this day off with calf raises, which were excellent. But anyways, back to the main subject matter at hand here, which is sacrifice part 2. So, the main reason why I wanted to discuss this was because, like I said in the car, when looking at certain things, particularly many stories and things like that, when it involves sacrifice, I think that one thing goes kind of unsaid, and that is that everyone sacrifices their time, regardless of whether or not you use it to its fullest extent or not. Time is something that we all have to give up, and I think that many people assume that that is enough of a sacrifice in order to get something from someone or something. Now, this is true for certain cases. There aren't necessarily true for all cases. In fact, it's very little in which case it would be true for. Honestly, the bare minimum that you can do for most things in this world is give it time. If you are not giving it time, then you cannot give the other sacrifices necessary in order for it to actually grow. If I go to the gym and sit there for 35 minutes, sure, I'm sacrificing my time going to the gym and sitting there for 35 minutes, but I'm not doing anything there. So the time used for it is not going to get me anywhere. So there has to be some level of effort in my part in order to get past just the sacrifice of time itself. So the main reason why I wanted to discuss this is because of the fact that I think that a lot of people fall into this trap. They don't realize that you have to give more than just time, even in something like a relationship or other aspects of that nature. I think a lot of people fall into the category of them just thinking that they can just give somebody their time or a thing their time without having to give anything else. And you could see that there are people who do end up giving a lot to these things and making sure that their time isn't just wasted. The time wasted will happen regardless whether or not you do the other sacrifices. And it will happen no matter what, because it's the one thing that we can never stop. No matter who we are, no matter what we are, we cannot stop time. So it is best to maximize the other areas of what you can sacrifice while also giving the time as well, because you have to also give it time. It's the last ingredient that matters in essence, but it's also the ingredient that without it, you can't really do anything. So it's a very weird double-edged sword that a lot of people some people will end up thinking it's end all be all, while others will think that it is not the only thing they need to do. So you have to be very careful about it. And as well, the level of what you sacrifice is usually inequivalent to the idea of what you're sacrificing. So for example, many people who are famous unfortunately have to sacrifice many things for that. There's probably some that we're not even allowed to know about, but that's a whole other subject for a whole other day. Even in the basic knowledge of things when it comes to fame and notoriety, the one thing that you sacrifice in there is privacy. And the higher the stakes, the more you have to sacrifice. And that's the simple fact of it. Whether it is a sport or relationships or family members or jobs or your future or anything that comes along those lines. The more that you put in, the more you're going to get out. But as long as you put in something of quality, then you're going to get something of quality back. I think that's another issue. And looking at the Bible, I'm going to use the example of Cain and Abel, because the idea is that Cain was jealous of Abel because Abel's sacrifices were always deemed better. But Abel gave better sacrifices than Cain did. And that's the entire point of the story, is to show that there are certain levels to these things, that you want to give your best foot forward and you will get rewarded for it. Now, of course, Abel was killed by his brother, and that's the other part of the story, because then you cannot be jealous of those who give it their all and their best quality of sacrifice if you are not giving your best quality of sacrifice, because then you will ruin not only yourself, but you will ruin the others who are trying to give their best to the world. So you have to be very careful when doing something like that and giving your sacrifices to something, because you can easily fall into the trap where you become Cain and kill something that your brother, or at least something that is equivalent to a brother, or something like that. That's the main crux of the story. Be careful to not make the same mistakes that these people have done in the past, so then that way you may be better off from it.
And we're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing. Exercises not filmed. None. Exercises skipped. Also none. Got everything in. Thankfully, even though I had to replace something, it was still the same thing basically. But anyways, back to the main subject matter at hand. Sacrifice, part 2. So the main reason why I wanted to talk about this was because there was enough meat left on this bone, particularly when it comes to sacrifice and the things that it comes with it, and the amount of sacrifice that you have to do, because I feel like time, although it is something we all sacrifice, is the least we sacrifice. And that's the thing that I want to basically get out of this, because I feel like a lot of people go into that sunken cost fallacy, but in reality a lot of it is just time. And time, although it is very precious for everybody, and I think that most people don't want to lose as much as they can, right? The issue is that it is the base level of doing anything. You're going to give it up regardless of what you do or whether you don't do. You're going to have to let it go. There is no stopping time and there is no reversing time. Realistically, the best you can do is make it so you live a little bit longer, but that's about it. There's no real stoppage of it. So if thinking that in that thinking or in that line of thinking, although it is something that people do sacrifice, it is something that you should think of in the sense that it is the lowest of the forms, but also because it is something where people may not think about these types of things, where like they will think that that's all they need to do when they have to sacrifice their efforts, their brain power, all of their futures, and all these other things that they probably should be technically putting up at the altar of whatever they need to do. And get it done. It sounds like a weird movie-like or biblical thing. Well, it is partly biblical because I've probably already used that example, but it is something that I feel like nowadays is so lost on people that they don't realize that these things, in order to get further ahead, you have to sacrifice things in order to get there. Nobody really ever gets there just by accident, really. And those who do, most of the time make it go to waste because they don't know what it takes to have gotten there. So thus they kind of end up becoming the last in line, really, because they fucked up. They don't know the work that it takes to get there. So they don't know the sacrifices, or take for granted the sacrifices of those that come behind them, and thus make their entire thing pointless, you know? So that's what I was really wanting to say with this one. It's just more of a interesting topic, especially because it's really fresh on the brain. There's one other topic that I might get into tomorrow. I might need a longer episode for, but we'll have to wait and see about that one. But this one was just such a interesting thing. Like I said, this might be an ongoing series, depending if I can find anything else. But this was enough of a piece that I felt like it deserved part 2. So with that being said, tell me what you think in the comments below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. This one was more of a slightly random, but not that random, knowing me, video. So a little bit not into what was yesterday. And this one's also more of a spiritualness one, almost. So you can say that, but we'll talk about that maybe on a different day. But anyways, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. I will be back on tomorrow with a new video. Please leave your comments and anything else like that down below. I will see you in the next one. Keep it heavy. Stay safe out there. Stay warm. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace!